the CalSTRS Investment Committee, and happy November 1st. Mr. Lamont King, would you take the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Treasurer Chung. Morning. For State Controller, Ms. Packwood. Good morning, Mr. Rosensteel. Ms. Higa. Ms. Yamamoto. Here. Ms. Dillon. Here. Ms. Hendricks. Here. For the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ms. Zumot. And for the Director of Finance, Ms. Ortega. Mr. Keeley, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. King. Everyone should have in front of them a few letters and communications. Obviously, from today's agenda, you can see we've amended the agenda for today. And we're going to begin with opportunities for statements from the public. So for those of you, for the members of the public that are here today, and you can see we have a significant turnout of members of the public that want to address us and speak to us. We'll be taking those comments at the start of our meeting today. There are two, I believe, major items that people are here to speak to us about. We'll probably take them in two parts, and then we will take a break probably in between them as well. So what I'd like to do right at this point is take a moment before I turn this over to our State Treasurer. I do hope that all of my colleagues at the dais have the letter from Treasurer John Chung in front of you regarding gun violence and the issues that took place in Las Vegas not too long ago. But before I turn it over to Mr. Chung, I'd like to thank you for bringing this to the board's attention. We've all received a copy of your letter with your request. As you know, CalSTRS was touched personally by the tragedy and the tragic loss of life that occurred in Las Vegas, specifically the loss of 3 CalSTRS members. Sandy Casey was a 34-year-old special education teacher in Manhattan Beach. Kelsey Breen Meadows was a 28-year-old substitute teacher from Taft. And Jennifer Parks was a 39-year-old kindergarten teacher from Lancaster. These were young teachers who dedicated their careers to the service of youth and whose lives were cut short by unspeakable violence. CalSTRS honors and mourns them, along with the many whose lives they touched. In the aftermath of Sandy Hook massacre of 2012, CalSTRS was the first fund in America to divest of manufacturers of firearms illegal in the state of California, which includes the types of products Treasurer Chung's letter mentions. As a result of our 2013 decision to divest, CalSTRS no longer invests in companies that manufacture weapons that are illegal for purchase or use in California. Further, CalSTRS staff and CIO were the leaders in negotiating the exit from a private investment in Remington Outdoors. Sadly, despite the actions of CalSTRS and other institutional investors to divest, gun violence has continued. Divestment cannot solve this social problem. The U.S. government needs to develop a comprehensive solution. Let's take a few minutes prior to the meeting to hear your request and public comment. This item has not been placed on the agenda, so we will not debate it nor take action today. As chair, I will direct staff to research the topic further in an expedited fashion, and if warranted, engage with these retailers. I also ask that staff to report back at the next meeting, and then we can decide if we want to place this issue under the review process for the divestment policy. Treasurer Chung, I'll turn it over to you at this point. Let me just. Can I push him here?
Next.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you placing this on the calendar for the moment. I appreciate you making the request to staff to review this. I think it's an important step forward, and I appreciate your leadership. And to my investment committee members, as as noted on the date, exactly 1 month ago, on October 1st, a gunman perched on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel opened fire on a crowd of innocent concertgoers at Route 91 Harvest Music Festival on the Las Vegas Strip. From the moment the first round was fired to the last one that Stephen Paddock put into his own head, approximately 10 minutes passed. But it was the eternity for the 22,000 concertgoers desperately fleeing the 15-acre enclosed concrete lot, trying to find cover, clinging to life, saying their last goodbyes. Most Americans are shocked and deeply saddened by the massacre that killed 58 people and injured 546. But shock and remorse provide little consolation to the families who must now bury a child, a sibling, a spouse, or a loved one. I was moved by your comments, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, it touches close to home here at CalSTRS. There's a time for demonstrations of grief and declaring never again, as there's a time to focus on what needs to be done. We have an opportunity today to do what needs to be done, to deny weapons of mass carnage to another killer stalking our innocent loved ones at school, work, or a Sunday evening concert. In 2013, this board, as the chairman noted, this board responsibly reacted to the shootings at the Sandy Hook Elementary School by divesting from companies that manufacture firearms and ammunition that are illegal in California. While it was a complicated 2-year divestment process, we emerged from 2015 free of any investment holdings in companies that manufacture firearms or ammunition illegal for sale or possession in California. Now I'm urging you to go further. I respectfully call upon this board to divest of its holdings of wholesale or retail sellers of these banned weapons. Neither taxpayer funds nor the pension contributions of any of the teachers we represent, including the 3 California teachers slain in Las Vegas, should be invested in the purveyors of banned military-style assault weapons. This includes bump stocks, slide-fire devices, and other accessories that can accelerate a semi-automatic rifle's rate of fire. These relatively easy-to-buy and inexpensive aftermarket products allow semi-automatic weapons to simulate automatic fire. A rifle that may normally fire at a rate of 45 to 60 rounds per minute can be altered to release a torrent of devastation at 400 to 800 rounds per minute. The deadly efficiency of these senseless products was on display last month when 58 were killed and more than 546 wounded in the span of the 10 minutes I referenced earlier. According to the ATF, 12 bump fire stocks were found on weapons recovered from the murderer's hotel room. This issue is of enduring importance to me. It would be recklessly inconsistent for anyone who supports California assault weapons ban to believe that investing in companies selling these weapons or ancillary devices ensures teachers' retirement security. Divestment in such companies would be faithful to CalSTR's existing investment policy and uphold the board's fiduciary duty to the pension system's members. Current policy requires us to review our investment decisions through a number of prisms, one of which is risk of investing in companies making products detrimental to public health and safety. It would be difficult to argue that battlefield assault weapons and aftermarket accessories designed to rain down bullets don't fall into this category. I respectfully ask you to assign staff, which you have, to develop a comprehensive accounting of CalSTR's exposure to companies which sell the products mentioned in this letter and find a path to divestment.
Thank you, Treasurer Chung. I understand that you are going to step down from the dais now and stand with some of the speakers who are here today to address the board on gun violence. Treasurer Chung, do you want the names of the speakers? Do you have them? Okay.
Among the slain were 36 women and 22 men. The oldest was 67, the youngest 30. 35 hailed from our state, California, including Jennifer Irvine. Jennifer was an outstanding, adventurous San Diego attorney who loved spending time with her friends and family. Her life ended after only 42 years when she was shot holding hands with friends, singing and dancing at the Route 91 Harvest concert in Las Vegas. Jennifer's brother, Jason, has joined us here today. I identify with Jennifer's horrible loss. Nearly 20 years ago, my sister Joyce was murdered in Washington, D.C. To lose a sister is one of the most horrifying, devastating experiences that one can only imagine and live through. And so you do. I miss my sister dearly every day. I pray for her morning and night. My sister inspired me to take action in my public service. I want to thank you, Jason, for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. CalSTRS Chair Harry Keeley, Investment Committee members. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Treasurer John Chung and the entire CalSTRS board for extending me the honor of speaking to you today. My name is Jason Irvine. I'm the brother of Jennifer Topaz Irvine. Jennifer was tragically and brutally murdered exactly 1 month ago today in Las Vegas at the Route 91 festival. I was informed by Jennifer's friends the next morning that she was shot in the head and was killed. I'll repeat what I just said. I was told that Jennifer was dancing and having the time of her life one moment and then shot dead through the head in the next. Her friends were holding her hand when she died. They said there was just too much blood for her to be alive, but people were performing CPR. And anyway, I visited my sister, Jennifer Irvine, in the morgue. I kissed her on her forehead and cried. I was sorry and I loved and missed her very much. I saw with my own eyes and felt firsthand the carnage these weapons inflict. I have to tell you, although Jennifer is no longer suffering this, I'm suffering this. Her brother-in-law, Ronald Williams, who is here with me today, is suffering this, and her friends are suffering this. No brother should have to bury his sister or receive her ashes in a box because she was shot through the head by a military-style weapon we place in the hands of a civilian, a weapon used to rain down hundreds of rounds of ammunition per minute from thousands of feet away and from 30 stories up. Now take my pain and multiply it by another 57 families who have lost a mother, father, a brother, a sister, a child, or perhaps a teacher, one of CalSTR's own. Then add the more than 500 injured, many of whom have a long upward battle of recovery to restore their lost quality of life. All this carnage, death, and destruction was accomplished by one person I will not name in a matter of minutes, resulting in the largest and most brutal mass shooting in modern U.S. history. I'm here today because Treasurer Chung reached out to me. You see, he has also lost a beloved sister to a senseless act of violence. Treasurer Chung and I agree and stand together. I'm here today specifically to say my sister would agree with Treasurer Chung's request that CalSTRS divest its investments in wholesale or retail sellers of military-style weapons, ammunition, and devices like bump stocks that can turn weapons already designed to be automatic into weapons of rapid-fire mass destruction. I ask myself, as you must be surely asking yourselves today, and as Treasurer Chung has asked, why would CalSTRS invest in companies that sell guns and ammunition banned by the state of California? Why would CalSTRS invest the money of school teachers in companies that sell weapons that injure and kill school teachers? Among the 58 people whose lives came to a senseless end in Las Vegas were, in addition to my sister, a California school office manager and 3 California school teachers. I also ask myself, as do many other Americans, I'm sure, is why is nothing being done by Congress? Well, if Congress won't act, then we the people will have to. People like us here today in this room, acting expressively on behalf of those who are not here today, including my sister, Jennifer Topaz Irvine. Thank you.
Next, Treasurer Chung, you're going to introduce the next speaker as well, or would you like me to do so? Thank you. Elizabeth Leslie from the League of Women Voters of California. Miss Leslie, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Treasurer Chung, for allowing me to be here today. Again, my name is Elizabeth Leslie, and I'm here from the League of Women Voters of California. The League of Women Voters of California supports Mr. Chung's proposal to divest from companies that deal in weapons that are illegal to own or sell in California. The unchecked proliferation of handguns and semi-automatic assault weapons is a major health and safety threat to Californians. The League supports strong federal measures to limit the accessibility and regulate the ownership of these weapons by private citizens. The League supports regulating firearms for consumer safety. While this current proposal does not specifically limit the accessibility of weapons, we do believe strongly that divestments and boycotts such as this one make a public statement and serve to change public policy. We encourage the board to support the proposal and ensure that California teachers' retirement money is not invested in companies that sell or promote banned weapons. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Irvine. Our next speaker on this topic is Dr. Bill Durston, the Americans Against Gun Violence and Sacramento Chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Dr. Durston, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Treasurer Chung, members of the board, members of the audience. I am Dr. Bill Durston. I am a Vietnam vet, former expert marksman in the United States Marines, and a retired ER doc. And I'm here on behalf of Physicians for Social Responsibility and Americans Against Gun Violence to support the proposal by Treasurer Chung that CalSTRS divest from any involvement in the gun industry whatsoever. As the chair has noted, though, this is largely a symbolic gesture. If we're going to stop this epidemic of gun violence in our country, we need to follow the advice of a senator from Connecticut who said, pious condolences will no longer suffice. Quarter measures and half measures will no longer suffice. The time has now come that we must adopt stringent gun control legislation comparable to the legislation in effect in virtually every civilized country of the world. The trouble with that statement is that it was made in 1968 by Senator Thomas Dodd from Connecticut after the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Senator Robert F. Kennedy. And since 1968, we have not adopted the kind of gun control he asked for. And since 1968, more U.S. civilians have died of gunshot wounds than all the U.S. soldiers killed in all the wars in which the United States has ever been involved. If we are going to stop this epidemic of gun violence, we need to adopt stringent controls, if not complete bans, on handguns, which account for 80% of all firearm-related deaths and which confer no net protective value. And of course, we need to ban the automatic and semi-automatic rifles that are specifically designed to kill and maim large numbers of people in a short period of time. In order to stringently regulate handguns, we need to reverse the 2008 Heller decision, which for the first time in U.S. history ruled that there was any kind of an individual right to own a gun in this country. An interpretation of the Second Amendment that the late Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren Burger called the biggest fraud on the American people that he had seen in his lifetime. As has been noted, gun violence obviously has a severe adverse effect on the quality of life for teachers before and after retirement. Some people say we're never going to be able to stop this epidemic of gun violence. We're confident with Americans Against Gun Violence and PSR that someday we will stop the epidemic. The only question is how many more innocent people will die before that day comes. And we hope that you will go beyond divesting in the gun industry, which we commend, and join us in enacting or working toward the enactment of definitive gun control regulations in our country, comparable to those that have long been in effect in every other high-income democratic country in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Durston. I don't see any other, I don't have any other names in front of me that want to speak on this issue. Are there other members of the public that are here to address this issue? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to acknowledge my colleague, Ms. Paquin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on behalf of the controller this morning who couldn't be with us, she wanted to express her deep condolences and sincere appreciation for all the speakers that were here. And this is such a horrific tragedy. And she also stands with our speakers in the chair in advocating for national gun laws to restrict the sale and use of these weapons of mass destruction. Controller Yee also would request that the staff begin to immediately engage and use their power collectively with other institutional investors to urge these retailers to stop selling bump stocks and other egregious weapons of mass destructions and guns. And failing that, to at the very least, to create a victims fund from the sale of these items to help victims and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paquin. I'd like to, before we close this item, I'd like to thank Dr. Durston, Semper Fi, Dr. Durston. I'd like to thank Elizabeth Leslie from the League of Women Voters and Mr. Irvine for being here today. Our deepest condolences and prayers and thoughts are with you and your family during this difficult time. We've given some direction to the staff. I think it's important to reiterate the fact that CalSTRS did respond in 2013. I was in a Uber early this morning, and unsolicited, the driver began to speak to me about a myriad of issues. I don't know why he chose to, but he started to speak to me. He was a pretty self-reflective guy, and he talked about his own journey in his life. And I just kept saying, that's interesting, you're on the right path. He was in his late 20s, and he said, sometimes you just can't make sense of things that happen in life. And unsolicited, he said to me, like Sandy Hook and the mass murderers that took place at Sandy Hook. And I thought about what we were going to be dealing with the first thing this morning, and I thought to myself, sometimes it's just synergy and the energy of the universe that's bringing people together. I thank the Treasurer for bringing this issue before us. This is an issue that we alone cannot solve. We're charged with one mission, and that is to ensure the retirement security of California's educators. That's our responsibility, and that's our goal, and that's our objective. And our mission is based around trust and building trust with the educators that have placed us here or other means that we've gotten to this position. Because of the size of our fund and the portfolio that we essentially have exposure to just about everything that's going on in the world, that which is good and some things that some of us may disagree with. But clearly, the issue, we take social issues and we realize that social issues and social concerns do affect the bottom line. Gun violence in America is a social ill. We cannot solve the gun violence in America, and we can't divest our way out of making this a safer place for people. At the same time, I don't think we should sit by idly and think there's nothing we can nor nothing we should do. I don't know what the answer is for us at this point, but I do think we're in a position of great responsibility where we have talented staff that have been with us a long, long period of time. At the very least, we get the attention of decision makers. We can partner with others. We can advocate. We can engage with companies. And we can try to move the needle. And if we do one thing around this dais, and we do make one decision over the time that I'm on this board, and that results in saving one child's life or one person's life, I think it will be actions worthwhile taken. Whether it's full divestment, I don't know. That's not for me to decide, nor us to decide at this point today. But no action and inaction, I think, would be irresponsible. So as the chair of the committee, I would ask that the investment committee work with me and the staff and our advisors and consultants to really think about the whole issue that the treasurer has raised for us to begin to think about and what the right approach is going forward. Because I think we can and should do something. We've engaged on many topics in the past. We've divested in the past. Sadly, those divestments have resulted in a loss in returns. Don't know what that would play out this time. But I thank the treasurer for bringing this to us today. It's unfortunate of an issue. Quite frankly, I try to limit myself to this type of exposure because it's just too much to try to take on with two young daughters. It's just simply, how do you comprehend what's happened? But thank you, Treasurer Chung, for bringing this forward. Are there any other members of the committee that would like to speak? Or Treasurer Chung, any closing words that you want to mention? Okay. Seeing none, can we just take about a 5-minute break? We'll start again at 9:50 with the next public comments, and it will give me an opportunity to get a few things sorted out here. Thank you. We're going to continue with our public comments this morning. We have, I believe, 3 speakers who are here to speak with us from Unite Here. We'll begin with And you'll each have 3 minutes to address us. I believe it's Ian Lewis.
Thank you, board members. And I'm Ian Lewis. I'm the research director for Unite Here Local 2, the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union in San Mateo and San Francisco. And I just want to start by thanking you, our sisters and brothers in the hotels in Las Vegas and at the Mandalay Bay in particular were thrust into a role that nobody would ever want to have to play. And I just want to acknowledge your historic leadership on the issue of the scourge of guns in America. And just acknowledge that strikes very close to home for our members and for hotel workers everywhere. Where you've been able to act, you've done so, and thank you for that. We're here today to give you an update on something that we brought before you last in July relating to the Pullman Hotel in Redwood City. It's a hotel that is in the CBRE Fund 7 portfolio, in which CalSTRS has a substantial stake. As you may recall, workers at that hotel have been asking CBRE, your fund manager, to ensure their right to organize into a union without risk of retaliation, intimidation, management interference, and in a way that protects labor peace at your asset. To date, despite all these months, despite speaking before you back in June and July, CBRE hasn't even given the workers the dignity of a response, let alone address this issue, which I think is something that should really raise doubts in your mind about whether they are stewarding your assets in the way that they should. I also want to highlight something that we found in a report that we issued to investment staff recently. Over the last 5 years, CBRE's investment staff have declined from 134 to 71, which as a result means that for every investment staff person at CBRE, they're managing an average of $1.2 billion. By contrast, a report by Preqin last year found that the average among big private equity firms is that they have 10 staff per every $1 billion. Now, whether that imbalance, that huge ratio of assets to staff that CBRE seems to have, has any issue with any bearing on the fact that they haven't responded, they haven't addressed this issue, we don't know. But I want to underscore that the longer this gets dragged out, the longer that workers do not have these guaranteed protections of free association and protection from management interference in their choice, the more the risk to labor peace at this hotel grows. And that's why we're here today. Just a couple of the workers from that hotel are going to speak. There's a number who've taken the day off. And I thank you very much again for your time addressing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan, is it Juan Chavez? Chavez, is it Juan Chavez?
Staff, please stand up. Greeting board members and staff. My name is Juan Chavez. I work in shipping and receiving at a CBRE-owned hotel in Pullman. I was here in June meeting. I was here at the June meeting, and I'm back because it's been more than 5 months since my coworkers and I asked CBRE for a fair process to allow us to decide whether we want a union without fear of being retaliated against. We phoned them, we've emailed them, and we visited the CBRE offices in person, and no response. I work at the Pullman for 3 years, starting off as a dishwasher, working my way up to shipping and receiving where I'm at now. The workers at the Pullman have become my family. These people every day I see. Every day CBRE remains unresponsive is another day in our lives it's impacted. These issues will not be resolved simply by ignoring the workers who helped this hotel be great. And this issue is an entire community concerned. We have shared the letter with over 50 elected community leaders, have signed on. Almost every elected official representing the area around the hotel has signed, and asked CBRE to instruct hotel management to allow us for a fair process. Honestly, me and my coworkers feel like we're being backed into a corner. After 5 months, it's hard to tell people, hold on, we're almost there. Does CBRE care about the community standards or the workers? If they manage your money, this is how they will handle labor issues. We all work hard every day, and we all love our jobs at this hotel. Please encourage CBRE to do the right thing and give us a green light for card check neutrality. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir. Ramon?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
My name
Ramon.
is Ramon Quintero.
Yes, Ramon.
I'm at worker at Pullman Hotel in San Francisco. I came to this country in 1989 looking for a better future for my family and myself. I got 4 kids, and at this time I'm working 2 jobs. I work at Pullman Hotel from 6 to 2:30. And I start my second job at 4 o'clock until 11 p.m. just to support my family because the rent in the Bay Area is very high. So that's the only way I can afford the rent. I worry that long term in my schedule is going to have a bad impact on my health. I got 4 kids to support. My family and coworkers are tired of waiting for a response from CBRE. We are tired of not being able to spend time with our family. We are tired of stressing about money while being ignored by the company that owns our hotel. We are fed up and can only wait so long before taking more further action or drastic actions. I respectfully request that the board ask CBRE why they have not agreed to the community standard fare process at the Pullman Hotel. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ramon. Any other members of the public here to speak on this issue? Okay, seeing none, thank you for being here, and we'll continue to dialogue with our staff and get feedback from them as to what the engagement has been to date. So thank you. I want to acknowledge item 2 on the agenda, and Jerry is going to speak to this issue. As you know, the Treasurer's Office had requested an item be added to our work plan. I think it's been communicated with you that I've asked that be removed from the work plan and that it be assigned to PCA to deal with. Jerry? Let me put you in here.
Oh, she needs to punch in first. I don't see her name. Did you punch in, Jay? There we go. Oh, Paul, did you punch in? Sorry.
I wanted to talk about the speakers.
That's okay. What do you want to do, Paul?
So why don't we have Jerry speak first and then we can grab you? Is that okay? We're having technical issues over here.
Did you want to comment on the speakers, Mr. Rosenstiel? Sure.
Sorry, punch in again.
So why don't we do that, and then I'll turn it over to Jerry. Thanks, Mr. Rosenstiel.
So I just wanted to clarify, so we're going to get a report back from staff? I mean, I think this is something that, you know, for us to ask CBRE what is going on is very consistent with our policy of engagement. I mean, if there's nothing to report now, I'd like to know when we would get a report, because I don't think, I mean, a report has to be a report in public.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, if we're not going to hear something today, when are we going to hear something back?
Can we have staff respond to that? It's my understanding a letter has been written to CBRE, and if that letter has not been shared with the full investment committee, it should be forwarded to everyone. That was direction we gave at a prior meeting. And if we could get an update that's appropriate at this point, because it's not agendized, but an appropriate response for Mr. Rosenstiel's inquiry, which is
Sure,
spot
we
on.
can
Thank
put
you.
that, we can send you an email update, certainly a copy of the letter, because that letter was sent to management. And then we can put it on the agenda for the February meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Want to weigh in there, Jerry, please? Thank you. You need to push your button. Thanks. So, Ms. Glazer-Hedrick.
Thank you. On behalf of the treasurer, I'd like to express appreciation for the committee's response to his request, which was to provide a background paper on the history application of the RCP, which is the Responsible Contractor Policy, and to investigate the possibility of expanding the policy. He looks forward to the forthcoming information and working collaboratively with the board and staff in the future. By way of background, the need for such consideration was precipitated by the fact that the treasurer received information regarding an employer that was actually connected with CalPERS, who was apparently interfering with the rights of workers to form a union, and there appeared to be little recourse for any sort of meaningful remedy. As a result of this awareness, the treasurer believes that broadening the application of the RCP should be explored at CalSTRS, as it has currently been explored at CalPERS. While current RCP policies for both CalPERS and CalSTRS appropriately demand lawful and efficient behavior from those with whom we conduct business, the RCP only applies to contractors tied to limited amount of real estate investments. This begs the question of why these same values and goals shouldn't apply across CalSTRS' many lines of businesses and investments. As expressed, the treasurer looks forward to receiving the report back and working with the staff and the board to further his concepts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hedrick. So if it's okay with the committee, rather than place this on the work plan, when I looked at the request, it seemed pretty straightforward. There were four questions that the treasurer is asking to be answered. I thought it would be best to accomplish that by having PCA respond in a report back to us within, I would think they could probably do that within 3 to 6 months, provide us the answers to those four questions rather than placing it on the work plan for the staff. Does anyone want to discuss that or have concerns about that? It accomplishes the request, which seems reasonable, without burdening the staff, having them take on a project midstream. Okay, yeah, Ms. Paquin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate the direction to have PCA investigate this request from the Treasurer's Office. And given the fact that we had just approved the work plan a few months ago and how much work is already assigned to the staff, we think that this is a prudent way to proceed.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are at item 1, the approval of the committee agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda that's before us.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second? And properly second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Brings us to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes from the July 12th, 2000 Investment Committee meeting.
Move for approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, the minutes are approved. Item listed at item 16. Ms. Smith, the annual investment cost report. And Ms. Wilcox, who else is joining you, Deb? Great. Okay, terrific. This is an information item. We have about 20 minutes set aside. Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Morning. This is an information item, as Mr. Keeley had mentioned. And before we get started, I wanted to just do some brief introductions. This is April Wilcox, your Director of Operations. To my right, your left. I also have 2 Associate Portfolio Managers with me. Shafat Hassan to my immediate left. And to her left is Melissa Duranco. We also have Raylan Lambert from Pavilion Alternatives Group available to answer any questions that you may have. Pavilion helped us gather the private asset cost for this report. Also, the investment directors are available to come up just in case you might have any questions about their asset class. We monitor and manage investment cost, not only because it's prudent, because it's our objective. It's our objective in our investment policy and management plan, right behind risk and return. It's our objective, and now it's our investment belief. We need to manage the cost because we know that that has an impact on the overall results. But more importantly, we know that our members depend on their retirement from our net returns, not our gross returns, but our net returns. This is an information item, and it provides the board a meaningful cost information across all the asset classes. And I thank you for your support in producing this. We started this last year, and we'll continue to produce this comprehensive report going forward. This report gives you an overview of the staff's monitoring, due diligence, and decision-making processes that they do in every type of investment strategy. They do consider cost. They try to lower the cost to get a high quality of investments, to generate the best results for our members. This time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the staff to continue the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to quickly jump into our results for the 2016 report. Our total costs came up to $1.6 billion. A little over 40% of that is carried interest. We also had an increase in the response rate for our private market managers. It's up to 98%. That's significantly higher than what we had last year. Comparing results, sure.
We have a question from the Senate.
Do you know what the percentage was last year? What the delta is in terms of last year to this year, in terms of response? Because it's 98 now, but what was it?
It was about 90, 91.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Comparing our results to the prior year, 2015, our costs went down just a little bit from 51.8 basis points to 50 basis points. But more importantly, if you look at how our costs changed compared to the net asset value year over year in absolute dollar terms, net NAV went up 4.6%, but costs went up only 1%. And costs with the carried interest went up 3.3%. Now, I want to highlight that carried interest is not just a cost comparison number. You do want that to track higher with your NAV because that's an indication of increased profits. But the cost, the 1%, the cost without the carried interest, we expect that to track lower as we grow in size and are able to achieve better breakpoints.
So remember, this is calendar year, so we're looking at 2016. I know it's hard to think back to that year, but it was all the election. All year was the election and the campaign. And so the markets were actually pretty flat. We only grew about 4%. So this year, when you get this report next November, expect that green bar to really jump a bunch. And I think that'll be awesome because we know our partners are booking profits. You know, we've said before, real estate's at an all-time high. Private equity prices are at an all-time high. We're tracking pretty close, knock on wood, to a double-digit return in 2017. So I think it's dependent on how well they can sell into these markets, you know, because a lot of that's accrued gains. But I think we'll see a much bigger jump. And in essence, you want to see a higher jump in your carried interest because that's an incentive fee. We make 4 times whatever we pay in that. So we want to see that grow because that means we're booking profits.
Mr. Rosenstiel, do you want to?
Yeah, just a question. So it's helpful that you pointed out that this is calendar year results because we think of fiscal year results. We just got the fiscal year results. So here we're comparing in this report 2015 to 2016. So what were our calendar year results in 2015 and in 2016? You said 16 was about 4%. Do you remember what 15 was?
I will go back and pull that. 15 was also a pretty flat year. Remember, in the bull market, we've had, from 09, a really big run up, double-digit returns. Actually, probably can look at the calendar year number. I want to say it was around a 5% return on that calendar year as well. So both were they were below 7, unfortunately. Both were low years back to back.
Pretty similar. Great, thank you.
So this was just 1 year, year-over-year comparison, but comparison is not always this straightforward. So I'll hand it over to April Wilcox to discuss comparability.
Well, since we just went over yearly comparison, and then after this slide, we're going to go over peer comparison. So I just wanted to spend just a quick moment just cautioning against comparability. There's no regulatory requirements or industry standard on reporting costs. And each pension plan is unique. There's different risk levels, mandates, there's different asset mixes, and different cash flow needs. As well, fees vary significantly depending on the life cycle of the underlying investments. So that's important to think about when you're looking at the maturity of a plan. But it's also important to think about when you're looking at this plan and you're looking at each year, not just the 2 years, but going forward as we do this report. So depending on what the investments in the life cycle is, you could have differences. Although we have seen an increase in the adoption of the use of the ILPA template, which is what we're using to collect these, not all plans have moved towards that. So you will see some pension funds not reporting a lot of granular cost that we are capturing. So just wanted to leave you with that before we move on to peer comparison.
Thank you. So this year we participated with CEM benchmarking survey for the calendar year 2016. So this slide here shows the trend line, the number of our peers in this group. We were a global group made up of 14 sponsors, which encompasses U.S. Pension funds, European funds, and Canadian funds. The smaller bar there starts the AUM at about $88 billion, and as you can see, it goes all the way up to $524 billion. CalSTRS is represented by the green bar. We're not the highest in this peer group, but we're definitely not the lowest AUM in the peer group either. So to put that in perspective a little bit, the median is $176 billion, and we reported $109 billion in assets under management. Using a global peer group, it helps us to minimize the economy of scales that we face when we compare ourselves to the U.S. Peer group only. Yes.
Did you just say 109?
Log in.
I just was pausing on you just said something about $109 billion under.
Sorry, $195 billion.
Okay, yeah, because
sorry.
109, I'm like, I'm pretty sure we have more than that. Okay.
Yes, we do.
I just wanted to make sure I was.
And that's as of the calendar year.
195.
195,
Thank you.
yes. So on this next slide, CalSTRS is represented by the green dots. The first bar is the global peers that we talked about in the previous slide, and then the other bar is how we compare to our U.S. universe. We had a cost savings of 10.8 basis points compared to our peers. And then what this means, as you've heard Chris say in the past, is that if you take our peers and have them run our portfolio and they use our asset mix and strategy styles, it would cost them approximately $211 million more. And what we found in the survey is that most of our savings does come from paying less for the external asset management compared to our peers.
So I just want to drive Melissa's point home. If you grab any one of our peers, any of the Canadians or us, the European funds, you drop their staff into this building, run the exact same portfolio, same policies, same asset mix, they would be operating at a higher cost than this staff produced. So we saved 200, what was it?
211.
$211 million just in 1 year. And a lot of that you're going to constantly see comes from what I've always said about our negotiation of really pushing hard on the base management fee and all of our expenses. Custodian, consultants, support consultants can tell you we're pretty brutal on them, on everybody.
So this concludes our presentation. I believe that this investment cost report is very comprehensive. It shows our dedication to transparency. It provides the board meaningful cost information across all asset classes. Melissa mentioned CEM, cost-effective measurement. We gave you that information about 10 years ago, but it was more on the public market side. But the last 2 years, we've been giving you private asset costs as well. We'll continue to do that. I believe we're achieving our objective right behind the risk and the return, and we're also demonstrating our belief.
Excellent. Questions or comments? Ms. Paquin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. This is a great report, and I was just curious, now that this is the second time that you've done it, have you had seen more efficiencies and savings in actually compiling all this fee data and putting it together?
Yes, every year we do an analysis of what we can do better. So you've seen some of our reporting methodology in the report change from the calendar year 2015 when we reported. We've seen that there's a lot of, using the ILPA template, we've seen a lot of general partners may report expenses or costs differently. So we're gaining knowledge in that arena, as well as having conversations with them about what do we mean about portfolio fees? What do we mean by, management fees is pretty simple. But it's helping us gauge an understanding of how they see the expenses and how we need to report them.
Okay, thank you.
Deb, if I can jump in. I don't want to discount the good news because it is good. I personally have been a bit frustrated at how slow some of our other public funds have been to adopting the ILPA template. They're endorsing it, but they're not demanding the manager's report on it. And it's been good in private equity, but it's still somewhat slower in real estate, and it's very slow in infrastructure. And as you can imagine, regionally, it's been accepted in Europe and the USA and North America, but very slow in Asia. And in fact, I'm going there next week, and that's going to be my big stumping speech, is the GPs have got to pick up and get up to speed in Asia on reporting under the ILPA template and get very comfortable with that. Our hope was to eventually have a computer solution that could just grab those templates and populate this database. I hoped we'd be there within 3 years, which would basically be next year. I think we're going to have to push that out. It could take 5 years before we see more of a digital solution to gathering this information and reporting it. So we're getting closer, certainly milestones ahead of where we were a couple of years ago, but we're not there yet.
Thank you.
And we are on the ILPA board, and we are definitely one of the big vocal people around the world at pushing that template and getting people to adopt it and report under it.
That would be great to get some other support on that, but thank you.
Mr. Rosenstiel?
Thank you. I have a few questions, and first of all, I want to thank the staff because I spent time with Deborah and her staff, I guess last week, getting a lot of my questions answered. And I think this is an excellent report. I'm thrilled that we are doing it, that it's improved this year, and that it has good news, what Chris just said, which did raise one question, Chris, because you said that a lot of the results were due to the staff negotiating better, and I assume that means that most of the difference between us and our peers is in the private asset classes, or is it in all classes? Or are there any asset classes where we're not doing well? I appreciate that on average we're doing well, and that's great, but can you give a little bit more granular?
Yeah, it is actually across all asset classes. It's a little bit of shaving everywhere. And remember, the bulk of the assets are actually in the public markets, not the fees, but the bulk of the assets. So a 5%, a 10%. I'll take you back to, you may not be fond remembering this, but Governor Schwarzenegger, he put us on a furlough. Our staff just basically took that personally and went to all of our managers and said, you are taking a 15% haircut. Boom. So every time we've had a chance to sort of reprice, the thing I would say, Paul, our newer contracts, it is more competitive and it has been tougher to get fee breaks. But I'll pick on Stephen and Carrie and RMS. You know, they were negotiating with people with a small portfolio in the hopes of a big portfolio. And so what we did is negotiate bigger break points later on in the fee structure. Once you made RMS an asset class, suddenly we're capturing those. So being clever in the way we negotiate and being tough on it. The newer asset, when we do RFPs, the newer contracts are definitely a higher cost than our older ones. So I really want to emphasize the value of hanging on to an old fee schedule from the 1990s is immense. And as the assets have grown, we're hitting those fee break points that we negotiated. I remember way back in 2000 pushing the staff to negotiate a fee break for $1 billion portfolio, and they thought, we'll never let an investment manager have $1 billion. That's crazy, but now we're there. So we're thankful we did. There's not any one part of the portfolio that draws my attention of being too expensive relative to our peers. All the directors get these broken out all the way down to sub-asset classes. What's small cap value? What's the average cost for a small cap value U.S. manager? And June can see what we're paying and what our peers paying. And that way we know if we're even close to the peer group, we're going to go back and renegotiate with everybody. And you know that what we're starting to see and I'm concerned about is these massive sovereign wealth funds, and I'll pick on Saudi Arabia. You're going to hear the initials PIF. And I don't know if we're going to call it PIF or not, but Saudi Arabia, they're going in and negotiating these sweetheart deals of handing somebody like $10 billion. And they're structuring it in multiple products. So we can't just say, okay, well, you're part of that's infrastructure and you're only getting paid so much. So we'll have to see how these massive funds, as they come in, how that changes the marketplace. I think, though, that we're going to still, you know, with CEM, get enough global sharing of information so that it really does give us better negotiating powers. Think about if many of you bought a car, nowadays you can see what the car really costs the manufacturer, so it'll put you in a better position to negotiate. That's the kind of data we're getting out of these cost measurement companies. So I'm hoping it helps us, but there'll be challenges.
A couple of questions about some of the individual asset classes. So RMS, the fees went way down, and was that because of a focus investing more in the long treasuries or the parts of RMS that are less expensive? Is it getting better deals with the active managers for things like trend following? Is it moving towards more passive implementation of the trend following? What accounts for that?
First off, the allocation to the long treasuries, that's based on the policy. So we didn't allocate more or less. Because they have been ramping up that portfolio, they're trying, you know, you're starting from zero, you're trying to get back to that core target, but not there exactly. And I would say it really, my comment about them negotiating break points in the fee schedule is really coming to roost. Because remember, when they were negotiating many of these, they had less than $1 billion. And they're only talking to managers about $100 million allocations. But Kerry negotiated to say, you know, oh, by the way, if it hits 500 million and then 600 or 700 million, I want the fees to come down. So it was our size and I think timing. A lot of people were getting out of those universes when we were coming in to negotiate. PCA, I know, did a lot of talking with people because they had 2 other clients looking at this area. We haven't gotten to the implementation on passive yet in that area, but it is something we are continuing to look at and want to do, and that would help even lower the costs as we continue. You know, we're very close to getting to the full asset size, but that would lower the cost of that overall.
Thank you. That's good news on the break points. On private equity, the fees again went down pretty substantially. It all was in carried interest. So can you explain a little bit about what was going on there? you know, as you said, total returns for the portfolio in 15 and 16 were about the same. Was there a big difference in returns in private equity, or what accounted for that? And I guess generally, should we expect to see a lot of variability from year to year with private equity and perhaps real estate returns because they rely, cost, because there's a heavy component of carried interest?
The answer is absolutely yes. You're going to see a lot of variability. And it really is going to have to do with the sale market. In other words, how liquid is the market to be a seller of assets? Private equity is always going to be driven by that timing. So remember, in 15 and 16, we're selling some of the investments they made in 06, 07, 08. And 2015 and 16, I was going to highlight, Paul, your question earlier about returns. We'll get to it, but page 303 shows a 10-year graph of the returns by fiscal year. If you look, you can see that 14, 15, and 15, 16 were very flat years. We were the end of the Obama administration. Markets were very sideways, and it wasn't a good time to take profits. We had a couple of exciting home runs, which we'll probably talk about in closed session in private equity. But it really wasn't a great time for people to take profits, and they were taking profits on pretty flat returns. You know, anything you bought in 07, you bought at an all-time high. Yes, you're selling it at an all-time high, but it didn't grow a lot. So that's why I'm really hopeful as we get out into future years, and you'll see real estate be very spotty, because when you sell a big asset, like at one point we sold the Arco Towers, which is now City National Plaza in LA, you know, that's a $200 million profit we booked in one time. A couple of years ago, we sold well, it's in this report, we sold a senior assisted living facility portfolio, which I think was, again, like a $250 million profit we booked at one time. So they'll be spotty. The quick rule of thumb is take that number, that carried interest, and multiply it by 4, and that was our profit. But I know that's a question you've had and some board members have had in the past, that we're working on being able to show you the booked profit from a cost basis, to show you, here's what, you know, our manager, the split of what manager got and what we got. But it sounds strange, but that's the number you want to see go up, because that means we're making money and getting closer to that 7%.
I would encourage that in the future, when we get this report, that we also get, you know, what the returns were by asset class for that same period of time. I think that would help put some of this information into context. And also, because of the variability, perhaps as we get a few more years of history here, you know, we can start looking at the average over a longer period of time to try to even out some of those variabilities, in particular those private asset classes.
Yeah, the big challenge with that, and the reason we struggle with it, is all the performance accounting is mark to market on a constant basis, and accruals, whereas costs are actual and cost basis. So we'll have to make sure we can get that and generate that, because cash flow figures into it. But you just like your home, you buy it at one point, you sell it at another. In your mind, you think of, hey, I booked this kind of profit, but the reality is there's an IRR over that time period. That's a better way to measure it. But what you want and what will get you is, here's what the booked profit was for us. Here's what our partner got. And it will be somewhat close to the fiscal year return over time, particularly in the private asset classes. But we'll find that's what we're working on, as a way to adjust that so you can compare it. But, you know, I just wanted to drive that point home, that this was a pretty low year. Not a great economy, not a great time to take profits, but 17 for a lot of people in a lot of areas has been a very strong market. Particularly, you'll see in technology investments that were made hitting home runs, because the IPO market isn't huge, but it's better than it was last year. So we're seeing sales in real estate and sales in private equity.
I have just one more question. Sure. So I'm trying to get a little bit better understanding, I think, of what Pavilion has done and does for us. There is the outstanding issue that came from internal audits that recommended the hiring of a a consulting firm to actually check the calculations on some of the private equity and I think it's specifically private equity fees and carried interest. And I understand, and this is an audit committee issue tomorrow, but I understand that by the end of this year there will be an RFP out for that. So that will be good. But that suggests that Pavilion doesn't do a recalculation. Pavilion does as I understand it, gets the information, seeks the information from the managers, and then kind of eyeballs it to make sure it's reasonable. And if they think it might not be reasonable, they ask questions. And maybe somebody from Pavilion is here, and we could understand that.
We can bring Raylan up to explain it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The simple answer is that Pavilion does a reasonableness test. So when they ask for this information, they ask the partners to fill out the ILPA agreement. It comes back, they do a reasonableness check versus what the audit recommendation is to have an independent recalculation of those management fees.
So good morning, Raylan Lambert. Nice to be here. Thank you for your question. So just to put perspective around the 98% response rate, about 76% of those were through fee templates. The data that comes into the fee templates is not necessarily always consistent or uniform or complete. So there are roughly 30 plus checks we do before we upload the information to provide the comprehensive data. And then there's another massive number of checks that we do on the data to ensure reasonableness. That includes, we track all of your partnership agreement information, so such things as looking at carried interest relative to the age of the fund, the type of distribution waterfall agreement. We have a number of detailed checks relative to what we know, because we do know private assets well, how those assets are configured with respect to their fee arrangements. So while we do not do a detailed recalculation, which is a different exercise, we do a tremendous amount of checking. That's in addition to the additional 22% where we have to obtain manually. And all of that around that would incorporate, these are situations where the managers cannot complete the templates for whatever reason. And so we work hand in hand with them and with staff who are extremely instrumental in this process of getting that response rate, to review the financial statements, supplementary reports, engage directly with managers to provide this information. And the reality is, I think managers are working very hard to get that consistency, to Chris's point about just broader adoption. We have seen adoption rates and the fee templates increase over time, but we're working very hard to ensure that not only the information is as complete as possible, but as accurate as possible.
And have you seen over time, not just working with us, but maybe with others as well, that you're feeling the accuracy is greater, that there's more transparency and accuracy coming from the general partners?
It is increasing. I mean, just think alone, response rates for most of your private markets asset classes with respect to the template was close to 100%, and others were not far behind it. So we are seeing that managers are becoming much more accustomed to completing and providing this information. A lot of it is just their own internal tweakings of their systems to provide this more automatically because it's quite extensive information. But we are seeing, just with respect to error rates in the information, simple things where they might have put the wrong signage or maybe included an accrued versus a paid figure. We're seeing that is becoming less common over time. But part of it is that we insist on managers completing the template. So we don't, if they refuse to provide it, we'll obtain the information manually. But I think just continue to work together as an industry to get what we can from them.
Okay. Thank you, but it sounds like the chairman.
I have a follow-up question,
Yeah.
if that's okay for you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you very, very
Yeah.
much to the staff and everybody who put this together. It's wonderful we're doing this.
Ms. Hendricks?
You added one of the questions I want to ask. So I just wanted to follow up. When you get that information, is that, because one of the things I think we've been talking with Deborah about on this project is that self-reported from the I mean, they're basically, with the ILPA form, I don't know a lot about it, but is it basically them self-reporting, this is what we charge, or, I mean, how do we verify, I guess, that they're telling us something that's accurate?
So
is my point.
we validate it against one of the, I mentioned sort of we have the host of pre-upload checks in the template. And a lot of that is verification against the financial statements that are audited, which is why calendar year is important. So those are audited financials that we're checking against.
Great, thanks, it's great.
Thank you.
To hear your perspective.
Any?
I have more questions.
Oh, yeah, sure.
actually.
Go ahead.
But
the
you're
floor.
lovely, and if you want to stay, but for you guys, I have questions. And I think Paul also kind of tapped into something I was wondering about, Chris, one of my questions is, how many other institutional investors are actually attempting to measure, cost in the way that we're trying to do it? And is there a way, because I appreciate what you said, April, about apples and oranges, and I appreciate that on the one hand. On the other hand, it's still kind of shocking to me that when I spend time in places with other trustees of other funds around the world, that there isn't some kind of standardization or some sense of common agreement that it's important for us to have transparency in measuring cost. I recognize all the complexities that you mentioned about our fund compared to across the river and across the globe, but it's still a little shocking to me that there's not a standard, standard approach to measuring costs and how institutional investors do that. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how we compare and are there ways that we can influence?
Sure.
Or are we already influencing?
And the consultants can jump in because you have a lot more clients. My understanding is right now, I only know of 5 funds in USA that are trying to track private equity. I don't know of any funds that are trying to do it in real estate and infrastructure like we are. And in our ability to influence, I actually met 2 weeks ago directly with CEM, who is recognized as the global leader. I know they've been criticized here in our building before, but they really are the one firm around the globe that's trying to do this, to promulgate a standard around the globe. And they are going to talk to their global leaders group and really try and get, I think if they got a European fund, us, an Asia fund to all back it, they could at least get something out there the industry could react to. Because remember, we know what the net return number is. And that's, like Deborah said, that's what we pay benefits with. And that's why everybody's focused in on just net. What we're trying to go back to is, okay, well, what's the true gross? How much was the opportunity set that they took? And that's where you actually get a lot of variation in discussing it. But the push right now in the USA is in private equity, but it's slow with our peer group. Do you guys want to comment? You see a lot more clients.
Yeah, I'll echo Chris's comments in the U.S. I see a lot of funds improving rapidly their cost calculations and transparency, but I haven't seen funds catch up with CalSTRS yet. The one other anecdote I'll share is I was in Europe a few weeks ago and shared last year's CalSTRS cost report with an individual who is heading up the UK public fund consolidation in the UK for reasons of cost. They're consolidating a lot of the public funds. And I can say with certainty that no institution of size in Europe has come close to kind of adopting the fee transparency measures that you have, and it's a big issue for them. So I think in this particular area, CalSTRS is seen as a global leader in cost transparency.
And I would only add to Steve's comments. I think the issue's a little bit more that it's across our limited client base that we serve, it's prevalent. So large scale funds are dealing with this, smaller scale funds are trying to deal with it also. But it is a resource question. I mean, you have a dedicated team, and that's just, if everybody had the resources like CalSTRS, you'd probably have standardization, but you don't.
And then my other question was, so this is our second year of looking at this report, and as we kind of continue to grow and develop, it would be helpful as we see all these numbers to be able to kind of look at fees paid relative to performance, and I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit, Paul. It just, and if there's a, you guys are good at graphics and stuff, like infographics, but if there's a way visually to be able to kind of see in the public versus private market, sort of, okay, if we're paying 6 times as much in private equity, are we getting 6 times the value, or does that make sense?
It does.
So I know we're not there yet, but if we could at some point get there, because I know for me, it would just be helpful to be able to see, because it's not just about reducing fees, it's getting value for the fees that we pay.
Correct.
So having some way to be able to look at that and be able to determine that more, it would be more helpful looking at the different asset classes, because I'm conscious of they all play a different part and they all have different costs, but being able to look at the value connected to the fees we pay.
We can take that back and incorporate it. I also want to draw your attention to, Makita did a public market equivalent analysis that we mentioned in this report, and that analysis did show that private equity did add value with respect to the costs that we pay.
Seeing no one else in the queue, before you leave, Ms. Smith and your colleagues, Mr. Ailman, thank you for an extraordinary report. One can't help but think as to what this conversation was like 2 years ago around fees. It's certainly a much more mature conversation about fees and the importance of fees. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my colleagues, Mr. Rosenstiel and Ms. Hendricks, for pushing on this issue. It was the right issue to push on. It's something that we do have control over. And what we've seen is that which gets measured gets done. And if I read between the lines here, we've been able to not only move the fee costs in the right direction, but we haven't given up return in doing so. So continue to thread that needle nicely, as you've done. We look forward to the third report next year, and continue to be the adult in the room as you're talking to our important partners about fees and why fees are important to us, because back of the envelope math, I think it's 5,000 members whose benefits are paid. If it's 211 million at 50,000 per year, it's about, I think my math's right, it's about 5,000 people's benefits. Okay, so thank you. Excellent report.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Job well
support.
done. Mr. DeRay, are you in the room? Item 4.
Give you some quick background on this. I want to remind you, you approved an RFP last July, which we posted. Got good responses, which is amazing. The real estate consulting industry is not real deep. The staff screened those down and had 3 finalists. You guys voted or agreed to create a subcommittee of the investment committee to participate in the finalist interviews. Those interviews were held just last week. 3 firms were interviewed. And what we want to present to you today is what the subcommittee selected as the potentially successful finalist, and have you meet them, and then have you approve the selection, and we'll close that. And then, what you approve is the selection subject to final negotiation of terms and conditions, as that's where we push back on fees. So turn it over to Mike. And Mike. Right there, radio show.
Need to give any other background, although I would say that there was a couple rounds of interviews that we did, and the staff participated in that. And also down in the finalist interviews, we had representation both from Mike and I in real estate, excuse me, and also Michelle Cunningham and Deborah Smith joined us in those final interviews. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to go with RCLCO, and that would be a change from Townsend has been our representative for the consultant, I believe, for about 9 years at this point in time. But the subcommittee made a recommendation to go with RCLCO going forward, and as Chris said, it would be subject to negotiation of terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions comments from members of the committee. There's a resolution on, I believe it's INV 23, which we're asking to be approved, and that is the, to direct the staff to engage with RC Elco to become the consultant, real estate consultant to the investment committee. Ms. Yamamoto.
Oh, just a question. Can you just tell us what our, whatever that is?
I apologize. RCLCO is the Robert Charles Lesser Company. They've been in business for approximately 50 years, giving advice to the real estate industry.
Ms. Paquin?
Thank you. I was just curious, Mr. DeRay, if you or somebody else from the subcommittee could kind of give us a flavor for how you looked at this firm and what the deciding factors were for this firm versus the others that were in the interview process.
I apologize. I have a cold, so I didn't quite hear the whole question. Are you saying what was the deciding factors for this?
Yes. So how do they, what weighed the decision for this firm versus the other firms?
I would say that, and I don't want to step on the board chair's toes here, but I'll say that what was found during the interview process is that because RCLCO, Robert Charles Lesser Corporation or Company, offered was that a deep experience in advising operating companies in the industry. They gave a perspective of what the risks and the trends going forward are going to be that was thoughtful and raised a lot of questions from the committee members. We think they have a unique aspect of the way they look at the strategy and risk going forward. And quite frankly, we also think they would be challenging to staff with respect to the way they're looking at things, which is different than the industry norms at this point in time that we've seen.
And has RCL ever worked with CalSTRS before in any capacity?
RCLCO has not worked directly with CalSTRS. They are on our bench to do independent fiduciary work. Is that correct, Mike? That's correct. But they have worked with a number of our operating company firms. I believe 4 of them they have done work with in helping them create strategy and process and procedure with respect to those firms.
And does that present any conflicts to have them as board consultants?
We do not believe it reflects a conflict from our perspective because they would be giving us advice at the strategy levels. We certainly will look into that and talk about if they have ongoing work and ongoing assignments with partners. And we have raised that with RCLCO and asked them to give us a list of any of our partners that are doing work with them.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, if there is a conflict, how would that be mitigated?
How would that be mitigated?
Yes.
Well, there's a couple ways you could mitigate a conflict like that. You could have a separation of because RCLCO is a fairly large firm with 60 professionals, we could have a separation of the professionals that work for CalSTRS and for the various clients they might have. That'd be one way of mitigating it. It's called an ethical wall, if you will. Another way to mitigate that is ask them to not opine on certain aspects of the portfolio if they have say a standing and deep relationship with an ongoing operating partner. We could also, the extreme would be ask them to stand down with respect to doing work for any operating partner.
Okay, thank you.
And I would add, Mike, we will ask them to, anytime they do a semi-annual report, particularly in closed session, if they name any names. Because remember, they're looking at the portfolio from kind of 10,000 feet, the whole real estate portfolio. But if they opine on any particular investments, we will ask them to disclose whether they have any conflicts of interest to you and to us all the time on any of those.
Thank you.
Ms. Hendrick?
I'm just going to move approval of the selection of our real estate consultant.
Okay. So that would be the INV 23 resolution?
Correct.
Okay, Ms. Hedrick has moved the INV 23, the resolution. Is there a second? Yeah, well, yeah. We will. We have, I believe they're, will be available.
They're upstairs meeting with real estate staff at this point in time, and we can bring them to meet you at your convenience.
Okay, thank you. So they're here for the duration of the day?
They're here for the duration of the day.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved by Ms. Hedrick, second by Mr. Rosensteel. Further discussion, questions? Ms. Dillon, did you want to weigh in? Yeah. Okay, Ms. Dillon.
Good morning.
Good morning.
When we brought on board our current consultant, and I'm going to use rebalance for lack of a, and I don't think that's probably the right term, but for lack of a better term than I grasp right now, we did some substantial rebalancing of our portfolio. We moved in, we went core value, and we did a lot of moving around. We sold off a lot of our real estate. Do you foresee the committee anticipating the same type of changes, or will we be leaving our assets in the same type of buckets, Mike?
At the time, we talked to the board that says there's two basic ways that portfolios are looked at in the institutional world, and that is the three buckets we currently use: core, value add, and opportunistic, or just core and non-core. It doesn't really matter which one we use because those buckets are known and we can separate them any way we want to. So I don't anticipate that be a change, but it would be up to as far as rebalancing amongst those, which were 60% core, 20% value add, and 20% opportunistic. There will be some discussions about what those levels will be going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ms. Higa.
Thank you. Just a question. You know, one of the things I think that's been important to the board when we've spoken to our consultants or done consultant selection is having confidence that the consultant is a consultant to the board. And I guess I just wondered if you could share anything about whether that issue came up during your discussions with any of the candidates.
It did. It was, I think it was one of the first questions that was asked. And Tom and myself were certain, and I think Mike raised it in the conversation. So we raised that distinction, which is a significant one. Okay, so seeing no one else in the queue, it's been moved and properly seconded to adopt the resolution on IMV 23. Is there any other discussion? Okay, it's a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. But before we move on to the next item, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the Townsend Group. In speaking with Mike, he seems to think that Townsend will be engaged in some capacity if there's a mutual interest on a going forward basis, perhaps in a different capacity, maybe ones that we don't see as a independent fiduciary to the staff. Clearly, Michaelin and Townsend provided important leadership to this committee at a time when we needed it. We thank her for her work, the decisions that were made under her guidance and her leadership, and we thank Townsend for helping us get through a very stormy period in the real estate portfolio. And we look forward to a relationship with a new consultant, real estate consultant, and Townsend, to the extent it's appropriate, will be working with staff in roles that they deem necessary going forward. If we could take a break now till, when we come back at 5 after 11, please. Thank you.